members of the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, colleagues of the School of Law of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Howard College campus of our university and the Conference on International Law, South Africa, and the Question of Palestine. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael Kidd, the Acting Dean of the school. Academics at the School of Law have established several research interest groups aimed at collegial collaboration in furthering research in different subject areas. The Navi Pillay Research Interest Group was created in recognition of Dr. Navi Pillay's contribution to the promotion of human rights. Dr. Pillay, an alumna of this law school, is with us today, and I will leave it to one of my colleagues to provide a fuller introduction before she addresses us later. She is the chair of the commission, which I mentioned earlier. Our Navi Pillay Research Interest Group aims to advance human rights and social justice research and advocacy in a broad and innovative range of spheres. The purpose behind the group is to establish an interdisciplinary collaborative entity to support research, education, policy, and advocacy interventions that respond to contemporary social issues. The Research Interest Group has taken advantage of the presence in Durban of the Commission to arrange this conference, which includes input from commissioners, as well as an impressive array of other speakers from spheres including academia, government, and civil society. The events of the 7th of October 2023 and the subsequent and ongoing situation in Israel and Palestine have dominated international news since then. This interest, particularly in our part of the world, has been further fueled by South Africa's application to the ICJ against Israel under the Genocide Convention. International law is now a major topic of discussion among people who have never discussed international law before. The case is clearly a source of pride, interest, and/or indignation, depending on the person to whom one is speaking. If we think of the term current affairs, the situation in Palestine and Israel is clearly the burning issue at present, pun intended. And we're therefore fortunate that we have such a distinguished body of experts gathered to speak to us today on the international law dimensions. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate and thank my colleagues, of whom there are several, but particularly Janine Hicks and Chris Giervers for putting this conference together at relatively short notice. I trust that you all will find the conference enlightening and stimulating, and I wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you. So I'm not going to go away yet. I've been asked to introduce the person who is going to provide the opening remarks. She was unable to catch her flight this morning, and she is joining us, I understand, by live stream. Is she there? Right. So it's my pleasure to introduce Advocate Shireen Saeed. Advocate Saeed is the Deputy Director General heading the branch Constitutional Development in the South African Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. Advocate Saeed has more than 28 years of expertise in development, human rights, and social justice, accumulated during her time served at the South African government, the United Nations, private sector, and civil society, serving as the Global Policy Advisor on Human Rights in UNDP's Bureau for Development Policy and lead advisor for the UN's post-2015 thematic consultation on governance. Advocate Saeed has a BA, LLB, and LLM degrees in the area of human rights and constitutional litigation, serves as a trustee on several trusts, both for profit and non-profit. She has practiced law in the areas of constitutional, administrative, labor, and corporate law, and worked within civil society, right from grassroots level on child rights, public interest legal matters, through various non-profit and community-based organizations. Advocate Shireen Saeed, welcome.
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, am I live? Wonderful. Technology is great when it works. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity and the invitation. And I must start out by saying if I look disheveled, it's because I am. It's been a comedy of errors this morning, getting on a plane, almost taking off twice, and then going back to deplane, at which point I realized I was only going to get there to you at around 12 o'clock if I was lucky. So better safe than sorry. And thankfully, technology has helped us. I'm truly disappointed that I can't be with you today and participate in the engagement, and also to meet so many old friends and colleagues on a very important issue. So I start out with that apology. So chairperson of the commission, former High Commissioner for Human Rights, commissioners, the Director General, who I understand was unable to make it and is somewhere over the Atlantic, a newly appointed commissioner to the South African Human Rights Commission, Professor Madlingozi, Senior Counsel Max du Plessis, fellow panelists, organizers of this meeting. A very good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, well, now virtually, at my alma mater. Or at least most of us, but more on that throughout the day, where I will join you now virtually. Commissioners, colleagues, guests, and friends, allow me to specially mention and welcome our guests, the former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Justice Navi Pillay, whom I've had the pleasure of working with whilst at UNDP, heading the Human Rights and International Law Division at the time, and similarly to our other international guests, but at least Commissioner Chris Sidoti, whom I've had the privilege of disagreeing with on several occasions as we brokered the then tripartite alliance of the national human rights institutions and the UN, that is now called the National the global network of national human rights institutions, to our colleagues from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, where again I was a former staffer. So we're very grateful to you and the organizers to host you and to support the work of the Commission for the benefit of peoples whose rights continue to be violated. And it's not just in Palestine, but violated globally. And I think the work of your commission is going to set trends and further precedents, and hopefully take us to elevate some of the ways in which we've been managing the collation of evidence to feed into various processes. Colleagues, activists, friends, you're also welcome at this round of a symposium, and I'm sure we are all very eager to banter, debate, and engage on this timely topic. I would ordinarily have said a coincidence, but such is the nature of global politics these days. So let's rather stick with timely. This year, as you know, South Africa celebrates 30 years of constitutional democracy. It was ironically on the 10th of December 1996 that former President Mandela signed into law the South African Constitution. The 10th of December is annually commemorated as International Human Rights Day, and a day that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by member states to ensure that no people will ever experience the atrocities of lifetimes. And yet here we are, some we're still debating the concepts, sadly. Following the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this day was intentionally chosen by South Africans to transform the oppression, violence, and the engineered structural discrimination to lead us into hope, peace, forgiveness, to guide us in rebuilding our nation. Based on the Freedom Charter, the foundational document that inspired the South African Constitution, that now enshrines the principle of our shared common humanity and aspirations to ensure peace and friendship beyond our borders. To therefore see, 30 years later, a people that supported our liberation, gave us refuge and hope, is not personally painful, but hurts our national spirit. So as South Africa, we are grateful, despite the circumstances, that we are one of the countries that can support the work of this commission. And we are in the midst of many great minds and intellectual capacity today to find ways in which we can be of assistance. In many ways, this is, for many of us, unfortunately, deja vu. When we as a nation were fighting for our freedom, the UN Special Committee Against Apartheid, set up in 1962 at UNGA, and it was this commission that kept our fight alive. In fact, South Africa's foreign policy, it declares that, which again inspired by our Freedom Charter, says that South Africa shall be a fully independent state which respects the rights and sovereignty of all nations. South Africa shall strive to maintain world peace and the settlement of international disputes by negotiation, not war. Our foreign policy, as you know, is aimed at improving the well-being, safety, and prosperity of all citizens and for the achievement of a better Africa and world. The key pillars of our foreign policy include the promotion of human rights, peace and stability, and the strengthening of trade and investment ties with other countries. So as you all know, South Africa has thus supported various resolutions of the UN and other international solutions to support a just and lasting solution that will bring peace to Palestinians and Israelis. Working together with the international community and in alignment with the relevant UN resolutions and international law, South Africa seeks to ensure a lasting and durable peace that produces a viable, contiguous Palestinian state coexisting side by side in peace with Israel, with the 1967 internationally recognized borders with East Jerusalem at its capital. Having said that, South Africa also condemns the attacks of the October 7th situation. South Africa supported unequivocally the UN Secretary General when he evoked the rarely used article of the UN Charter, Article 99, on the 6th of December, to call the Security Council to press to avert a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and unite in the call for a full humanitarian ceasefire. The symposium, therefore, is timely as it is a reckoning of the politics of international law. The commitment to justice and bringing an end to the human atrocities globally resonate deeply with the collective consciousness of the global community. And it is at this moment, and hence this meeting and symposium being very timely, which requires us to interrogate the nature of international law, its place in international politics, and calls on us to factor in the full engagement of social justice in this era of accountability. Following the recent ruling of the ICJ and noting the reactions of the ICJ order as well as the build-up to the ICJ case, this meeting would be remiss if the opportunity to reconvene around what is a just global order. More importantly, who defines this global order? In so doing, it will require for us to reconfigure the concept of accountability, especially when it comes to international politics. It's already well defined in international law. So now we need a rethink of how do we hold parties, state parties, accountable. We've all seen too often how the international system and its machinery is politically choreographed to yield specific outcomes. Human Rights Council is but one example. And in the last 3 days, many of you would know that the UN Relief Workers Agency, the only agency for years allowed in Gaza to provide healthcare and education, which wasn't provided by anyone else, has been stripped of its funding under the guise of being a threat. That begs the question, what will the order in 30 days look like if basic humanitarian support and assistance is not allowed and enabled? An interesting yet no surprising phenomena, and perhaps before I get to that point, I think what we're seeing in the international community thus far, for many reasons, is the global politics and how we've almost moved from separating, unfortunately, and even though those of us human rights activists hate to say or admit, but civil and political rights and how it's managed in a neo-colonial way, and also with regard to a global economic order, whereas socioeconomic rights, again, where we hate to make the separation after the Vienna Declaration on Human Rights that recognizes the interdependence, interrelatedness, an indivisible nature of rights, sets us into a situation where socio-economic rights are really left to political choices, and usually, and in the context of what we've seen with the UN Relief Workers Agency, as being managed again politically. We've also seen over a period of time, which really came to the surface now, that aid architecture become administrative states to the extent that the civil society environment has had to engage in issues in various different ways, and sometimes almost by default shrinking the space having shrunk, and governments to be able to bring to the fore the issues of inequality as they emerge. So it's a serious phenomena that we really have to look at as to how does the global order look like, what are the implications for human rights, and how do we ensure that human rights, as it were, is not captured within this particular realm. An interesting yet no surprising phenomena that was sparked during the Arab awakening is that of the global protests and show of solidarity by civil society. And with great thanks to social media, we've been able to comprehend the scale of support or dissension. in many of the instances, almost always in stark contrast to the state parties that they live in. And it's that collective consciousness that has now been reawakened or actually surfaced to ensure that it is as global as it is. Mechanisms to factor these views, though, through the multilateral system require a radical rethinking and create such platforms to consult widely and engage on the issues. Is this enough given the current design of multilateral system? In the voices of civil society in the legal process, might the evidence collected from this commission feed into the legal process? It is, after all, a creature of the General Assembly resolution. There are numerous examples, and the most recent example, and some of you may debate this, which is also acceptable, given the most recent example is that of the high-level panel created by the Secretary General when there was no official opening to collate and respect legitimately the views of civil society in the making of the process that informed the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. I led this process at the time at the UN, so I'm somewhat pained that I'm unable to engage with you later during the civil society discussions to hear further views, but nonetheless, I will join in later, and we will have the feedback coming through to us at the Department of Justice. So it would be interesting, as I said, engaging with different ways in which we can feed into the processes of the UN and the multilateral system. And this is a part of it as you engage later today. Later on this year, and I'd be remiss if I don't do our own little advertisement, with your permission, we will convene a human rights conference on the International Day of Racial Discrimination, which is our Human Rights Day for South Africa that inspired the International Day. And this conference is intended to look at 30 years of constitutional democracy. So I invite you to feed into those discussions. And of course, you are invited to attend that meeting. It will be virtual as well. Gauging from the design of today's symposium and the speakers, you clearly have the ingredients for a robust and passionate engagement, which I'm sure I will experience in as much as one can in this two-dimensional way. I would have much preferred to have felt the energies, but there is much to discuss, and I've barely skimmed the surface of the implications of international law, political choices, and the realities for the people of Palestine and those experiencing atrocities around the globe. I thank you on behalf of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development for creating this opportunity, and a special thanks to the IT team for making this possible in such a short period of time, which was phenomenal. And with that, I wish you all the best in the deliberations and look forward to the outcome. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Sheetal Soni from the School of Law, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. The United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, was established by the UN Human Rights Council in May 2021. The Commission's mandate was to investigate all alleged violations of international humanitarian law and all alleged violations and abuses of international human rights law leading up to and since the 13th of April, 2021, including the root causes of the conflict. In addition, the Commission collects and preserves evidence of international law violations and has a mandate to share with accountability mechanisms, including legal proceedings. Since the 7th of October 2023, the Commission has been investigating violations of international humanitarian law, international criminal law, and human rights law committed by both Hamas and other armed groups in Israel and by Israeli security forces in the occupied Palestinian territory. The first findings of the Commission will be presented in a report to the Human Rights Council in June this year, followed by a report to the General Assembly in October later this year. The Commission is undertaking a mission to South Africa from the 29th of January until the 9th of February, led by the Chair of the Commission, Judge Navi Pillay, and Commissioner Chris Sidoti. The commissioners will visit Durban, Pretoria, Johannesburg, and Cape Town, where they look forward to engaging with legal practitioners, civil society organizations, experts, scholars, non-governmental organizations, and government officials as part of their mission to South Africa. The Commission has consistently recognized the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and has called for an end to the occupation. In December 2022, the Commission welcomed the request of the General Assembly for an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on the legality of Israel's prolonged occupation of the Palestinian territory, as per its own recommendation to the UN body. In light of the importance of the recent South African application to the International Court of Justice under the Genocide Convention, the Commission looks forward to engaging with these stakeholders. I would like to take the opportunity on behalf of the organizing committee of the symposium and the School of Law to express our delight at having collaborated with the Commission of Inquiry in convening this important and timely symposium, and thank them for their generous contribution in assisting us with bringing some of our speakers to the event. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our first speaker, Sun Kim, a legal advisor with the United Nations assigned to working with the Commission of Inquiry. She is a lawyer who specializes in international criminal law, humanitarian law, and human rights. She is currently a legal advisor for the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, and previously was a United Nations legal officer at the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, investigating violations of international law and human rights committed there since 2011. Her international law experience includes the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, where she worked on the case of Prosecutor versus Radovan Karadzic. As an attorney for the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights in Berlin, as well as an intern at the pre-trial chamber of the Extraordinary Chamber